Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm coming to you today from Washington, D.C., and joining me is David Swanson from Charlottesville, Virginia. Thanks for joining us, David.
Thanks for having me.
David is the Washington representative of Democrats.com. He's the co-founder of the popular blog After Downing Street. And he's also been following a piece of legislation that's working its way through Congress, a war supplemental bill, which is supposed to help fund two wars, but within it has some other interesting twists and turns of legislation, including some funding for the IMF. So, David, tell us what this bill is about and why you think it should not be passed.
Well, this is yet another, and supposedly the last, if it passes, which we are very hopeful it will not, supplemental emergency spending bill. So, these wars that have been going on for the better part of a decade, this is off budget. We're pretending it's an emergency, funding the occupations and wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's 80-some billion, plus extra pork and airplanes that the Pentagon doesn't even want, and so on, gets it up almost to 100 billion. Then there is $8 billion for the IMF, plus $100 billion in loans to probably bankers in East European countries through the IMF. There was this measure attached in the Senate to ban the release of torture photos, and that has been taken out, and that is a victory. But the fact that we successfully got something bad taken out is not a reason to now support the bill. We should support the bill if it's good or not. And the overwhelming thing that it does is it gives $97 billion more to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, to expand them, to expand these bombings with unmanned drones. And here we are less than a month away from these deadlines in Iraq, when by the end of June there should be the removal of all U.S. troops from localities in Iraq. Let's see if that's going to happen. And by the end of July, a chance for the Iraqi people to vote.
There's an interesting convergence of forces here trying to vote against this bill. You have a certain number of Democrats, and you should give us the numbers in a minute, that are opposed to this on the basis of opposing the war. There are some Democrats that are opposed to the funding for the IMF. There's Republicans who are for funding the war, I assume, but who are against funding the IMF. So there's this whole convergence of forces all trying to kill this bill. So explain what these different forces are, first of all. Let's dig into that.
Well, this is a bill that passed in the House initially, and 51 Democrats and 9 Republicans voted no. And these were 51 Democrats voting no to the war funding to please their constituents who want these wars ended. It then went to the Senate, where the IMF measure was added, and now we're back at the House for a vote that includes the IMF. And so you have a prediction by the Democratic leaders that they will be able to bring it to a vote on Tuesday. You have a prediction that the Republicans, as a bloc, will oppose it. It's entirely possible that every single Republican will oppose it. Not just the one or two like Ron Paul who oppose funding the wars, but will oppose it because of the IMF money.
If the IMF piece was taken out of it, the Republicans probably would vote for it. Is that not correct?
That's absolutely right, and they did before, which is why 51 Democrats were able to vote no and claim they had voted no, knowing full well that it would pass. And so now we are here in a unique situation where we don't even need 51. We only need about 38, 39 Democrats to vote no. And it actually matters. They might actually vote no on war money and block war money.
Where do you think the voting is at the moment?
Well, we've got a whip list at After Downing Street and Democrats.com and Firedog Lake. All of the blogs are working this, and we've got about 34, we think, solid no votes among Democrats. Many of those because of the IMF or because of both, some of them strictly because of the war. And we've got about 15 or so leaning strongly toward no, but not fully committed. And we've got about 20 that are just undecided, not telling us anything one way or another. So the chances of getting to 39 is entirely possible. But these people are being hammered hard by Nancy Pelosi, by Rahm Emanuel.
These people meaning the Democrats that are there to vote.
I mean the Democrats who might vote no, or they're being pushed to vote present if they won't vote yes. They are being threatened with a cutoff of any funding for their next campaign. They may be being threatened with challengers in primaries. They are under intense pressure, the freshmen in particular, among the Democrats in Congress this year, from the White House and from the Democratic
And what
leadership
sort
in
of
the
things
House.
are the people, the blogs you're talking about, and people you're talking to? What kind of things are they doing to try to influence this vote?
Well, there are all sorts of creative protests and demonstrations going on. I mean, we've talked about healthcare, not warfare, and we've seen peace groups pushing for single payer healthcare endlessly. Today was the first time I saw a group of doctors go to a Congress member's office with a giant blank check made out to the IMF and say, "We actually need money for healthcare, not for the IMF, which forces nations to strip people of healthcare." So that's helpful. We've seen all sorts of creative on the ground protests and postcard signature collections and so on. But what we're doing online is mostly generating phone calls. And you can go to Democrats.com or After Downing Street or Firedog Lake and type in your phone number, and a little machine will call your phone and connect you to one office after another of the dozen or so key members who are borderline. And you can do this after hours and leave messages. You can do it during the daytime and talk to them and report back what they tell you. You can take 10 minutes and call all of the key members who might vote no. And it's encouraging that a number of organizations are really pushing this when we might actually get it. It's not just for show. It might, at least temporarily, stop this bill.
Thanks very much for joining us, David.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.